Hey, what's happening, babies? Again, I know it's been a minute since I've uploaded a podcast episode. A lot of times I have to take my time and make sure that I'm speaking from my core and not just from some weird random lens of let me stay relevant. It takes time for me. I need time. But we're definitely already in the space of planning out season 2 because we're currently finishing out season 1. And I want to say thank you, deep thank you to those of you who have been tuning in and, giving me a chance. I really appreciate you. Lately, there's been a lot going on mentally for me as far as processing emotions, processing things in real time, and wondering like how is what I'm dealing with going to be relatable to other people and what they are dealing with. And I always go back to that same statement: speak your mind, speak your thoughts, because you never know who needs what you have or who needs what you're thinking of or who is thinking the same exact thing that you are thinking. So don't muzzle yourself and make yourself feel like you can't speak up. Just speak and let the rest follow. So that's what we're doing today. After careful thought and consideration, I had come to the conclusion that a lot of folk have developed this obsession with humbling other people. I'm always asking why, though. What is the obsession with that? Why do people feel like they have to posture themselves as above? I sometimes feel like it's because we all want to be the only, we all want to be the number one, the biggest in the room, till we realize that we're not the only ones in the room. So that leads me to my thesis as far as what we will be discussing today. Thesis. There is a strange and persistent obsession some people have with humbling others, diminishing them, reducing them, or trying to pull them down a level. And for anyone who has experienced that pattern repeatedly, you start to notice some things. When you are a reflective person who processes life inwardly, you begin to understand that this behavior often has far more to do with the person performing it than the person receiving it. In many cases, it is projection, unresolved insecurity, and a need for control or a desire to define someone else in order to stabilize how they feel about themselves. Because of that, we have to be careful not to internalize someone else's external projections, especially when we have already done the work of healing, growing, and moving forward. Yet sometimes people continue to hold on to outdated narratives as if time, growth, and change never occurred. And over time, that contradiction collapses onto itself. It raises a deeper question. What causes someone to invest so heavily in an outcome that never actually materializes? What happens when a strategy of humiliation, control, or narrative shaping simply doesn't work anymore? This episode is about what it means to outlast those external behaviors, to continue becoming yourself in spite of them, because at some point authenticity becomes stronger than any attempt to diminish it. And there is a kind of freedom that comes when you realize you still get to live your life anyway. You do not need an elaborate response or counterattack. You do not need to engage every narrative. You only need to continue showing up as yourself, growing, healing, and living with consistency and clarity. When does the attempt to humiliate someone stop revealing the target and starts revealing the person doing it? Because humiliation begins with the intention to shrink someone, but simply continuing to live fully and authentically, it places that intention into suspension. It no longer lands the way it was meant to. It loses its grip. And what remains is your life continuing to move forward anyway. Point one, the human truth. In a perfect world, we would all want to be seen clearly and understood correctly and given the space to grow without being tied to old versions of ourselves that we no longer live in. To be real, not everyone moves with the same level of maturity or emotional awareness. And people don't always update how they perceive you, even as life changes. It isn't just about personal growth, it's a basic truth of human behavior. Perception can lag behind reality. And on the basis of that same human behavior, we've also developed something deeper and more complicated, a psychological tendency towards hierarchy, comparison, and the need to be on top. For some, that becomes an obsession with being the only authority, the only strong one, the only successful one, the only one with control in the room. And in that mindset, humbling others becomes a way of reinforcing that position. It stops being just about opinion or conversation and starts becoming more about power, control, and identity protection. Because when someone is overly invested in being the only one, the presence of someone growing, evolving, or standing firmly in their own truth can feel like a threat. Not because of what you're doing, but because of what it represents in them. When you finally understand the bottom line, that everyone does not share the same level of security that you have within yourself, and that it's going to cause a rift or a disruption in the atmosphere simply by your calm demeanor, and the fact that you possibly move in a sense where you are self-assured and you know who you are. Unfortunately, because of the circumstances that are obvious, you are not bothering anyone, you're not messing with anyone, but apparently you not bothering anyone is bothering someone. Sometimes in the silence of your composure, there's always a disturbance of someone's insecurities in the room. Does that mean we get arrogant and full of ourselves? Absolutely not. It means you stay anchored in knowing exactly who you are, because when you do, the jabs, the humiliation, the tactics, the strategies, it just rolls off of your back. And it becomes a sport. It might become fun at some point for you. We're used to it and we're strong enough to take it. Point 2, the physiological mechanism. When that need for hierarchy becomes emotionally charged, it can start to shape how people interact with others in subtle but consistent ways. Instead of simply coexisting with someone else's growth or presence, there can be a tendency to recalibrate things through comparison. Who is ahead? Who is behind? Or who is right? Who is more valid? And in that space, humbling someone can become less about truth and more about maintaining internal balance. It can turn into a form of reassurance, a way to reaffirm one's own position by trying to reduce someone else's, not always consciously, but behaviorally. And what makes this especially complicated is that it often gets framed as correction, honesty, or even concern, when underneath it can be something more emotionally driven, like control, discomfort with change, or difficulty adjusting to someone no longer fitting an older mental category. So instead of updating the perception, the effort goes into reinforcing the original one. That's where the pattern becomes sticky. The more someone resists being placed in an outdated box, the more pressure there can be to keep that box intact. At that point, the interaction is no longer just about the person being spoken about. It becomes about the emotional stability of the person doing the speaking. And that's where the dynamic shifts from observation into obsession. Because the goal quietly moves from understanding someone to maintaining dominance over the version of them that feels familiar. Point 3, stay anchored and outlast it. Speaking from my own experience, I realized something important going through this myself. I kept growing anyway. I didn't always know how things were going to work out when I started this process of speaking openly and building this podcast. But it became a declaration for me, a line in the sand, a refusal to shrink myself just to make other people comfortable with my existence. It became my way of choosing to live authentically, speak my truth, and keep moving forward no matter what was happening externally. And what I've learned through that is simple. Life on the outside will always be loud, but it doesn't have to define your direction. When I started to see myself move forward anyway, even with everything happening around me, it became proof that I wasn't stuck in anything that people tried to assign to me. I had already moved beyond it. And that's the message I want to extend to others. Don't lose sight of who you are just because of what's happening around you. Stay anchored in yourself, because if you don't, everything external will try to convince you of who you're supposed to be or what box you should stay in. And if you are not grounded enough, it can pull you off your path. I can't give a perfect formula for how to erase what people say or prevent misunderstanding, but I can say this. You outlast it by staying true to who you are, by continuing to show up, by refusing to abandon yourself. You can't control what people say or how they frame you, but you can control whether or not you let it define the final version of your story. That part is yours, and letting that stand is how you stay free. Conclusion. I am not responsible for stopping what people say about me. I am responsible for not becoming what they say I am. I kept showing up anyway, because at some point you will see not everything that is said about you deserves your participation. Not every narrative deserves your energy. Not every attempt to humble you actually lands. In most cases, it just fades. And that's what I mean when I say watch the party die, because eventually the noise runs out of momentum. The narrative runs out of fuel, and what's left is just you, still standing, still becoming, still moving forward. And when you outlast it, you ain't even got to fight it no more. It just stops working. Thank you so much for watching today's content. If it's resonated with you in any way, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can follow us and find us on platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. The links are all in the channel bio. If you would like to support the channel, the link is also in the bio, but only if your heart desires and only if you choose to. Thank you for being here, and I will see you soon.